Jak Daxter the Precursor legacy. It has been some time, and it's very hard to go back, admittedly, to games from so long ago. You want to compare it so badly to modern games, I mean you can, but that would be silly. It's like making fun of the dinosaurs because they didn't have the technology or the know-how to survive a catastrophic event that wiped them out. They were dinosaurs. They didn't know. What's our excuse? Same applies to the Jak Daxter games. The first one, Jak Daxter the Precursor Legacy, came out in 2001, so nearly 20 years ago. I mean, technology and game design has advanced quickly in just over a decade, so is there really a way to quantify or review a game from back then without putting your perception of what modern day gaming should be like, or games are, onto it? It's possible, sure, but everyone has their own perception of what games hold up or age well, and those that don't. So this here is less of a review, though you could call it that. It's more of a question. Does Jak Daxter and the Precursor Legacy still hold up? The short answer, yes. The long answer, keep watching, or don't. Maybe you don't like me at all. I understand. I don't like me either. Now look, this game is almost 20 years old, so I don't technically need to give the obligatory story warning, but I'm just gonna say, if you have somehow lived in ignorance of this title for this long, or maybe you woke from cryostasis just a few days ago and have a lot of things to catch up on, I will be discussing the gameplay as well as the story. That being said, spoiler alert, I don't know if I can spoil too much of the story, because not much happens. There's nothing really to spoil. You see some bad people do some bad things, and you have to stop them from doing those bad things. It's fairly simple. That should not be misconstrued as a knock against it. Not every game needs to have this majestic and crazy, complex, and interwoven story. So essentially we begin with our heroes Jak and Daxter, investigating two mysterious figures ordering lurkers, a common enemy you fight in the game, to gather eco, a source of power and, I would argue, intrigue in the game world. And also precursor artifacts, or artifacts left behind by the precursors, the land's ancestors. Daxter falls into some dark eco after Jak and him are attacked and becomes a ferret/weasel mixture, which is what the wiki told me because I had forgotten. But anyway, they return to Samos, who is also the Green Sage, and he tells them only the Dark Sage can change Daxter back. It's a fun setup that establishes the world without forcing it on you, and it does not take long after before you're thrown into the action. You're taught how to run, jump, and attack before you know it. What ensues is what we basically know as a 3D platformer, something that would be toned down in later entries, an old school collectathon. And collect you shall. A collect you shall. That's what we should call it. A collect you shall. You'll be collecting power cells, precursor orbs, and 7 scout flies per level, which gives you a power cell. This is where most of your time is going to be spent collecting power cells. You're told that you need these to travel forward and unlock certain abilities for your zoomer or speeder bike, which is a much easier way to describe it. So you upgrade your speeder bike, and that's how you progress in the game. Now let's start with the visuals. Now, this is a PS2 game. It was released in 2001, so even if you slightly expected that this game would have amazing and incredible graphics compared to that of, say, Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2, then you'll be incredibly disappointed here to find that that is not the case. But we're back in 2001, so we're going to turn our 2020 brains off. The world is colorful, vibrant, and for the time it's incredibly detailed. Overgrowth overcomes old precursor buildings, neon lights, and trap-infested levels with tons of moving parts that all work together, and even enemies themed to each level as the challenge becomes more and more difficult. Each area feels distinct with its own story and personality without feeling like it doesn't belong together. Even when you go down to a snowy mountaintop or a cavern overtaken by spiders, it never feels like it was hastily put together or even designed without other areas in mind. In that regard, the game can be pretty simple with its visuals and art design, but sometimes simple is good, and I can appreciate a game choosing a more simplistic design that is effective as opposed to trying to be so obtuse as to make me scratch my head as to what they were thinking. The facial animations too, while a little cartoonish compared to, say, today, they're quite good, and while there aren't a lot of characters in this world that you interact with, the ones you do feel like they belong. We're a big old pointy-ear family. That brings us to sound. Now, not much to say here, really. The sound design itself is pretty straightforward. You hear Jak's footsteps change depending on the terrain. They pat on the sand, but crunch in the snow. Not revolutionary by any means, but definitely the minimum of what you would expect, and that's pretty good. Enemies too sound like what you expect them to sound like. The rat-like lurkers squeak, and the abominable snowman-looking ones sound like, well, abominable snowman. Again, the theme here is a thematic consistency, which this game has a lot of, which definitely holds up today. Voice is, well, the few you get are okay. Kira, Samos, and Daxter are all done pretty well. Kira sounds innocent, yet smart. Samos, wise, but cranky. Daxter, just the right mixture of wisecracking and fearfulness. Jak himself being a mute, a trait they would later change with later games in the series, he doesn't talk here, he just follows everyone's lead. What a guy. So not much to say there. Those few characters that you do hear, they shine. The others are pretty forgettable, and you don't really spend enough time with any of the characters to really have an extended dialogue with them. So, all in all, voice, not terrible, but probably underutilized. The music is good, but it's more for ambiance and location sounds, so it's not really anything that will blow you away. That being said, it fills out your experience. The music is almost, in a way, perfectly paced to the way Jak moves around the world. Now gameplay, you'll swing, jump, double jump, long jump, get eco power-ups, collect and lunge, and ground pound. The controls and gameplay are still pretty tight to this day. It feels easy to play and it's not too complicated. It's smooth and fluid, which not all other games can say when you go back to them after all this time. You'll always see your shadow too before you land on a platform, and the majority of time when you do, it's all your fault. You're bad at games. It's okay, so am I. Oddly, I found some of the platforming pretty tough, but not overly punishing. It's like taking a test you thought was very hard and thinking, man, I really bombed that. Only to get your grade back and realize you did pretty well. Better than well. You did great. You can punch enemies or ground slam them or ground pound them or whatever they want to call it, or spin attack them, because if that's how they want to play, that's what we're going to do. Blue Eco helps you activate platforms, use jump pads, and open doors. Getting Yellow Eco adds a fun dynamic of shooting projectiles to faraway enemies to open up certain crates. The Red Eco power felt super underutilized in my opinion, as it's supposed to enhance your attack, but it only came into play towards the end of the game before it could be of much use. All of this combines to make a pretty fun gameplay experience that you can still enjoy to this day. There's enough variety in gameplay that you don't feel like you're doing just one thing for too long, except collecting things. You do that a lot. Actually, now that I'm here, I might as well say some of the things that you do have to acquire. The power cells range from finding a man's lost muse, to opening up a hidden crate, to climbing to the top of an area, to giving someone 90 precursor orbs, and then give them 90 more, and then maybe even a further 90 orbs, or give a mysterious oracle 120 orbs, and then a further 120 orbs. I guess they ran out of ideas because this is the least inspired part of the game. It's like, well, we're making them collect things. Might as well make them collect everything with the power cells in tandem. I don't know why I made them sound British. That was weird. Sorry. It's lame, and yeah, you technically have to get creative to find some of the precursor orbs also, but it takes away from the gameplay. It's just not as fun. Every power cell you find that has that requirement of you giving away precursor orbs, there isn't some cool action or section with a bird or navigating a tricky platforming section or even riding around in the ever so precise zoomer or speeder bike, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't ruin the game, but it just gets very repetitive in a way the gameplay often does not, so it can really ruin the pacing. The story, like I said, is basically not really existent. It works for what it is, and they give you little tidbits throughout, but like a lot of games from this time, even today, the story is really just a backtrack for the gameplay, which still works pretty well today. Thankfully, they took parts of the story and the lore in future installments and really expanded upon the story in some exciting ways. Now, I haven't played those games in a while, so I can't tell you exactly what I think of their story and their gameplay, whether or not it holds up, but hopefully we will get to them soon, or rather I will. I don't know who we is. So the question we started with, yes, we. The question we started with is, does Jak and Daxter still hold up today? Largely, yes it does. It has the look and design of an older game without feeling like an older game. Movement is smooth, platforming is tight, and the general gameplay loop is fun and filled with variety, even if sometimes with collecting the items, it doesn't always respect that gameplay variety. In Jak Daxter the Precursor Legacy, we have a game that has stood the test of time for the most part. Now, you won't trick anyone into believing that this is a current-gen game or even a next-gen title, but it's an easy game to pick up and even play today without having to worry about anything super complex going on. You can just enjoy the gameplay and enjoy its world. Our next journey with the franchise will continue in Jak 2, a much more dark and complex sequel. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, subscribe and give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, then don't. Give it a thumbs down. Don't be afraid of me. Thank you for watching or listening or vigorously exercising to my voice for some reason. I love you. Maybe.